Hello, AUCTC participants. Sorry I can't join you today. Something came up that is keeping me on campus this week. Nothing bad, but just needs me around. So I'm going to talk briefly about IT threats, and I'm sort of coming at it from the angle that in some ways threats over time don't really change. The specific ones can, but really the nature of the kinds of things that we have to watch out for is really the same as it's always been. So I hope you appreciate Weinberg's second law there. Doesn't hurt to remind ourselves that a lot of what we're dealing with is very complex, and some of it's house cards. Anyway, so let's start with our IT shops. Really, what we've got is a collection of information, which is a very valuable asset unto itself, assets, hardware, that kind of thing, agreements, the various licenses and service agreements that we have, and then other resources, including our people, budgets, that kind of thing. So this is what we have to work with to try and do good things for our institutions. And sort of who's in the game that we work with, and that we also have to, in some cases, guard against. Well, we've got a whole bunch of different groups of people. Everything from our own staff to our clients, people we buy stuff from, software vendors, hardware vendors, service providers, people we go to for advice and information, consultants. There is a group of evildoers out there, folks who just pick us as a target, or at times will pick us as a target. The environment is also something that we have to deal with. It's not a person, but certainly it takes actions that can affect our ability to do our jobs in a fairly significant way. And, last but not least, we've got our own senior administration, which hopefully we're not trying to guard from too many risks coming from our senior administration, but they can be unwilling participants in things that can cause us grief. Maybe sometimes willing, I'm not sure. Anyway, never at UPEI. So we've got our actors, we've got the resources that we have to work with in our IT shop. And so there's some vectors that can be used or can convey threats or risks from the actors around the outside to our IT shops. And so we've got a lot of human elements, like plain and simple human error, social engineering, insufficient training. We've got issues around the technology that we use, so there's technical defects, there's out-and-out vulnerabilities. We can have interruptions of service from our own service providers. The power can go out, our internet feed can go down. There's things that we can not do well when it comes to, putting all the diligence we should into some of our plans, or just generally poor planning. Of course, we have to deal with things like malicious software, and when people think of IT threats, this is often where their mind goes. But to me, that's just one little facet of the whole thing. Disruptive events, your basic hurricane or flood. Bad luck. It's not really a vector, but in some ways it is. I mean, sometimes you just end up with the 1 in 10,000 controller card that fails in a critical piece of equipment. I mean, there may not be anything wrong with its design as such, but we got a bad one. And then when it comes to senior administration and sort of over in that corner, one of the big things we can look at is policy gaps. Do we not have the sorts of policies and the controls in place in order to, let me put it this way, help people do the right thing? So this is, I tried to kind of break it down a little bit. What do we have that we're trying to safeguard? Who are the people who can often inadvertently, sometimes deliberately cause us grief? And then what are the ways, how do the things get connected? How do the folks on the outside of the ring cause problems for us in our IT shops in the middle? And so when something bad happens, there's usually sort of an immediate outcome. So, and these are often sort of, you think of them in a technical context. So we can have a data loss. We can have a compliance issue where, we've got a problem with the way we're doing things. We're not in conformance with a license. Privacy breach, of course. So data may not be lost, but it may be exposed. We can have data corrupted. Service degradation, service interruption. So that could cause problems for the people who are trying to use our services. And I mean, you could come up with, a dozen more easily of these, but these are the kinds of things that sort of happen immediately that sort of make us throw up our hands and go, oh geez, I wish that didn't happen. But what's probably more important is what trickles down from that. What's kind of the ultimate repercussion of those bad things happening, and that's what I tried to capture the gist of those sorts of things here. Our reputation can be damaged, and that could be not our shop's reputation, but our institution's reputation. Strained relationships with either other units within your institution or with people on the outside of the institution. Loss of control. If you have a bad incident and people believe that, in order to prevent that from happening again, the best way to do it is to remove you from the equation. You could lose control over something that you'd rather maintain in your portfolio. Of course, then there's things like legal liabilities, failures of a business function, registration didn't work. And of course, there's financial losses involved in some of these. And as you can see, these are not by any means mutually exclusive or anything else. And some of them are primary repercussions that may involve others. So for example, you may have a failure of a business function like registration, and that leads to damaged reputation because look what happened at UPEI, and there was a problem with registration, and who would want to go there, and the students are leaving in droves. That was a hypothetical example, by the way. That hasn't happened. So how do we try to avoid those bad things? We've got some different tools in our toolbox, and I tried to capture them here. And they come down to the same old. We need effective management. We need good leadership. We need policies and controls that are clear and effective and enforceable. Training and education for our staff, for our users, for ourselves. Appropriate choices in technology. We want to make sure that we're making good decisions when it comes to the choices we have in hardware, software, and services, so that they're well suited to the business goals that we're trying to achieve. And of course, you need good governance, sort of riding herd on all of these things to kind of ensure that they happen. The one I haven't spoken about yet is continuous improvement, and I think it is really important that we don't just sort of get things in a good state and then leave them there. We have to constantly be examining what we do and how we do it, and look at ways that we might be able to improve upon any of these prevention or mitigation tools. And so, you're never too old to learn, as they say, although I stopped learning many years ago. And we need to make sure that we take those lessons learned, and that we, learn from the experiences of others, from our own experiences, and identify ways in which we can improve our technology, our leadership, our policies, and so on. So that's just sort of my thoughts on IT risk. A lot of this you could apply to just about any kind of risk, but in my mind, really, it's not that significant in some ways what the latest exploit is or the latest problem with technology. It's important that we have the experts who can understand and come up with ways to deal with those kinds of potential vulnerabilities, and take steps to close the doors and eliminate the gaps. But because that changes so rapidly, you need to have good, solid things like what are on this slide, so that you have a way of identifying those vulnerabilities, determining what needs to be done, and then enacting it and making sure that people follow the best practices, good practices, policies that you have in place to ensure that the probability of those problems occurring is as low as possible. So I will stop there and turn things back to my fellow colleagues on the panel. Thanks very much.